I'm joined by Eugene Kontorovich, a professor at Northwestern University School of Law in Chicago. He attended the U.S. Embassy opening today in Jerusalem and was a proponent of having the U.S. Embassy move from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Palestinians would say this is a provocative move. Jerusalem, the status of that city has not been discussed. Palestinians did not agree to it, that both lay claim to the city. Why is it a good idea for the U.S. to move its embassy there?
First of all, Jerusalem is and has been the capital of Israel for 70 years since the creation of the state. Long before the Palestinian issue emerged after 1967, Jerusalem was the capital, and even before that, it had not been recognized. So this simply recognizes reality on the ground. More importantly, Jerusalem is today a unified city, and acknowledging this reality tells the Palestinians, who have rejected 3 prior peace offers that included parts of Jerusalem, guys, if you say no, this does not mean we're starting from the last offer when we reopen negotiations. Once you say no, the next offer is going to be not as good. And that's a dynamic that needs to be injected into these negotiations.
But, I mean, there are 35% of Jerusalem is inhabited by Arabs. The final status after the peace accords of 1993 always had in mind that Jerusalem would be discussed at a later date. This is just imposing a reality on a big chunk of the population of that city without their buy-in.
I think that's really not true. First of all, the notion that because there's some
that was the fact at the end of the peace accord. Yeah.
The fact that there is some minority in a city that's different from the majority means that they require a separate sovereignty. The fact that you have 2 peoples living in one city means that Jews and Arabs cannot be part of one sovereign. That's like saying Washington, D.C., if it has 2 different ethnic groups, they need 2 different countries. That's, I think, a fundamentally racist idea. Now, it's true that the status of Jerusalem is something the Palestinians can negotiate on. But just like Israel was willing to negotiate about Jerusalem when the United States said no part of the city is your capital, Israel didn't say, we're not going to negotiate because you're denying even Western Jerusalem as our capital. So the Palestinians, they can negotiate now. And if a deal is reached, Israel is free to yield parts of this city, certain neighborhoods, to the Palestinians. Just like most deals contemplate, Israel will give neighborhoods and areas in currently sovereign Israeli territory in the Negev to the Palestinians. Just because it's Israeli now doesn't mean that can't be changed in a peace deal.
So you would support the idea of parts of Jerusalem then becoming the capital of a future Palestinian state, including the eastern parts of Jerusalem that are inhabited by Arabs?
I would certainly not support the notion that where ethnic groups live has to determine the sovereignty of that. That because Arabs live in a particular neighborhood means it can't be part of Israel. Because we know that Jews can't live in most Arab countries, or pretty much any Arab countries. So, however, it's not the case. Arabs can indeed live and do live in Jewish countries. But the point is, the fact that Israel now has sovereignty over certain territory does not predetermine the status of negotiations over that territory. However, when America didn't recognize Israeli sovereignty, the Palestinians said no to a deal about Jerusalem 3 times.
Now, I just wonder, you have the UK, you have the international community, all basically saying the UK, Theresa May, saying today we will not move our embassy there. We believe essentially the Americans made the wrong decision, that this is predetermining an outcome of a negotiation that hasn't taken place. How do you explain that the international community, by and large, is opposed to this, but Israel and the U.S. support it, and really are alone almost in supporting it?
So, first of all, there was a fragile, ossified consensus about this pretense that Jerusalem, including pre-1967 Jerusalem, to which the Palestinians have no claim, is not part of Israel. What Trump has said is this is not true, the emperor has no clothes, and already within a week of the moving of the U.S. Embassy, 2 other countries are joining, and already European countries have said they're going to move their embassy to Jerusalem. So America is not alone. Not only do you have Paraguay and Guatemala, you have the Czech Republic, you have Romania, and many more in the pipeline, and that's in a period of just a few months. 2 years ago, nobody, and already Russia has actually recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital. 2 years ago, nobody would believe this could happen. If you said that Russia, America are going to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital, it seemed crazy. So there is this consensus, but the consensus is shattering rapidly. And by leading from in front, not from behind, I think the U.S. is taking the leadership role in making a new consensus that's based
But
on
in the
reality
meantime,
and not
you
on
have a
failed ideas.
situation like Gaza, and then we can argue, but really a crushing majority of countries around the world believe it's the wrong decision, even if you have these examples that you cited, some countries in Latin America and a couple in the eastern part of Europe. But in Gaza, you have just a shocking death toll, where you have Palestinians at the border fence area protesting, 55 plus killed in one day. What's going on there?
So first of all, it has nothing to do with Jerusalem. I should note that Gaza is on the other side of the country.
It was exacerbated by the announcement, for sure.
Let me answer your question. It wasn't exacerbated. It was pre-planned.
Yes,
it was indeed. It was staged by Hamas. This is organized by Hamas, which runs Gaza, a terror group. These are not protests. These are also efforts to break the fence. And Hamas has declared that its goal is to penetrate the fence.
You didn't have a single injury on the Israeli side and 55 killed on the Palestinian side. There's a huge imbalance here. And even if you accept the idea that Hamas was behind some of it, these were Palestinian civilians who were killed, including children under the age of 16.
I don't understand this body count figure. Last week, Israel bombed Syria. Last week, Israel bombed Syria, Iranian Revolutionary Guards bases. They killed over 50 people without an Israeli casualty. Does that mean you can't bomb Iranian bases in Syria, that that's not a legitimate target?
But you're equating Iranian bases in Syria with Palestinians along the border fence in Gaza. I don't see how those two things are comparable at all.
The Palestinians were involved in planting bombs and trying to breach the fence, and they've declared their goal. It's not a secret, except maybe on CNN. The Palestinians have declared that their goal is to break through the fence and reconquer Israel. This is what Hamas has said. Now, it's true they use human shields. And, you know, the only connection between the embassy move and what's going on in Gaza, which has been going on for weeks, which also happens every time around Israel's anniversary, which the Palestinians call the Nakba, the only connection is that they did understand that getting negative headlines for Israel at the time of the embassy inauguration is a good idea. And Hamas is putting children in harm's way in order to generate these negative images and negative headlines.
All right. Professor Eugene Kontorovich, thanks very much for joining us from Jerusalem.